the cave. This happened more than 30 years ago, and it happened to one of his cousins. He remembers the place perfectly because his maternal grandmother used to live there, a community called Isla Arena in Campeche. The people there make their living fishing. He remembers that when summers came around, he and several family members would travel to Campeche, to Isla Arena, to his grandmother's house, and spend the whole summer together, which must have been a lot of fun. At night, the cousins, all around the same age, would go down to the shoreline, build a bonfire, roast marshmallows, and chat. Sometimes they'd start telling stories, not exactly horror stories, more like legends, about gnomes, things people pass along. He remembers this particular story very well. It left a mark on him and the rest of the family, because one of the cousins told a legend from that very place. It was called The Legend of the Black Slave. According to the legend, there was a black slave in that place. He had arrived at Isla Arena as a slave, owned by pirates. These pirates had him bury and hide a treasure so no one else could steal it. Rather than drawing a map which someone could steal, they used a living person as the map. No one would suspect that this slave was the one who held the knowledge of where the treasure was buried. So, the slave went into the jungle and buried the treasure. The problem came when the pirates returned and told him, "Take us to the treasure." He couldn't remember where it was. He searched desperately, but the jungle had grown and changed, and he couldn't find the spot. The pirates, furious, took his life. They knocked him to the ground and cut off his head. The legend goes like this. After that tragic event, it is said that if you encounter the headless black slave in that place, he will show you where the treasure is buried. But in order for him to hand over the treasure and end his suffering, you must give him a new soul. The people also say, this cursed spirit lives in a cave. So they told this story around the fire, and it was just a legend, something you hear and move on. Years passed. His cousin, who was living there in Isla Arena, had grown up, had 2 children, and had just had her youngest, a baby, not yet a year old. Her husband, as happens far too often in Mexico, simply abandoned her, left her there on the island with 2 small children, one not even a year old, and no money. She had nothing to eat. She didn't know what to do. The only skill she had was fishing. She practiced something called micro-fishing, going out in a small rowboat, casting a net in the sea where she thought there might be fish, and pulling it back. Small fish, but enough to sell and feed her family. Desperate, she had no choice but to go. She couldn't bring her older child, but she couldn't leave the baby either. Being alone, she wrapped the baby and strapped him to her back and went out fishing with him. One day she went out and caught about 20 or 30 fish a good day. On the way back home, she saw a storm approaching. She started rowing as fast as she could, but the storm was moving faster than she was. She had 2 options: push through the storm and most likely lose her life, or change course toward the cave. She figured the cave would shelter them, so she headed there. When she arrived, she thought, if this cave is where the headless slave spirit hides, maybe I could make some kind of deal. Maybe he'd take pity on me, pity my children, and we could share the treasure. With nothing to lose, she went inside. The cave was cold and dark. She walked around for a while but found nothing. She thought, what am I doing here? And went back outside. When she came out, she saw that tied to the same rock as her little boat was another boat. She froze. Who's here? Then she heard a voice. Hello? She turned. There was a man, not the slave's ghost or spirit, but a normal-looking man, someone from the area. He said, sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. A storm was coming, so I came to take shelter. You too, right? Yes, she said. My baby and I are waiting out the storm. Well then, let's wait together. She relaxed a little. They sat and watched the storm roll in. The rain, the churning sea, safe there in the cave. They started chatting, getting to know each other. Then he asked her, "Do you know the legend of the slave?" "Yes, of course." "If you were to meet that man, would you dare make the deal?" She thought for a moment and answered, "The way things are for me right now, I would seriously consider it." They sat quietly, watching the sea, each thinking about how a pirate's treasure could solve all their problems. Then, as quickly as it came, the storm passed, one of those brief, fierce tropical storms. Afterward, the sky looked as if it had never happened. It was beautiful, like a perfect sunset. She stood up, the man stood up too. "Nice to meet you. Take care of yourself." The baby had cried at some point, calmed down, even laughed. The man had playfully patted the baby's head. "Take care. I hope we see each other again someday." "Thanks. You too, take care." Then, "May I give your baby a kiss?" "Of course." The man leaned close and kissed the baby on the head, said goodbye, climbed into his little boat, and left. She rode home, arrived quickly, and started checking on the baby, and noticed he was asleep. Strange, he should be hungry by now. She rushed inside. The baby wouldn't wake up. She picked him up, shook him gently. He wasn't sleeping. He was dead. She screamed. Neighbors came running. They rushed her to the hospital. She arrived with a dead baby. The doctors tried everything, but the doctor delivered the terrible news. "This baby has been dead for at least an hour." At least an hour, which was exactly when the man had kissed him. A new soul. The woman fell into a terrible, terrible depression. She didn't know how to go on. At her lowest point, she even thought about ending her own life in the sea. And then, at the very worst moment, she received news. Her husband, the one who had abandoned her, turned out not to have been as poor as she thought. He had a house and money. And he had just died. Now she inherited everything, the treasure, in exchange for a new soul. And he ends by telling us, legends aren't always exactly as they're told.